Okay. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, evening, depending on your time zone. First of all, I would like to thank all the panelists, our viewers, and our supporters as well. We are here now to the panel entitled De-dollarization and Financial Cooperation with Professor Bruno De Conte, Dr. Chujin Mao, Professor Julia Braga, Professor Mok Faisal Karim, and Professor Vera Gers Dimitrov. Before we begin the panel, just a few guidelines. Each participant will have 15 minutes to speak, and at the end, there will be the time for the questions from the audience. So let's introducing the topic before the presentation of our panelists. The 21st century has created new challenges for the future of the international monetary and financial system. This challenge involves academic, institutional, and political discussions on how to make these systems more efficient and comparative, so that it can include all countries in the North and especially in the global South. To discuss this topic, we have here today experts on the subject from different fields, policymakers, professors, and financial market professionals, who will be able to offer different perspectives on the subject. So, to begin our round table, I would like to invite Professor Julia Braga to speak. Julia Braga is Undersecretary of Macroeconomics and Commercial Policy at Brazilian Ministry of Finance and Associate Professor of Economics at Federal Fluminense University in Brazil. She holds a PhD in Economics from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro and is co-editor and the journal Review of Keynesian Economics. Julius, please feel free to start your presentation.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning, good evening, depending on the part of the globe you are. It's a pleasure to join this panel to discuss one of the most debated issues in today's global monetary system. As Rafael said, I am currently serve as Undersecretary for Macroeconomic and Trade Policy Monitoring in the Ministry of Finance in Brazil, but I am also a researcher and a professor at Fluminense Federal University, and today I will use my hat as researcher. So just would like to make a brief disclaimer. Today I am speaking in my academic capacity, and the views I express are my own, not necessarily not the official position of the Ministry of Finance. So I will share my presentation is just to guide my intervention today. So that's me. Can you see my screen, my slides?
Yes. Yes, we can see. We can see, Professor.
Okay. Let me just try to minimize so that I also can see you here. Just a second. Minimize. Okay. Okay, now it's good. Good to go. So, so the first one and the second one, right? You can see the second one right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, good. So let me begin by referring to the analytical framework developed by Professor Franklin Serrano from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, which were my advisor in my doctorate. He wrote a paper presenting his framework for the monetary standard dollar, what he's called floating or flexible dollar standard. So since the 1971, he said that the world economy has operated under his dollar standard. So under this arrangement, the US dollar is the global key currency. But unlike previous system, it's not backed or by any asset. So it's entirely unconvertible in this sense and free from any external constraint. So under this arrangement, the US can run permanent current account deficits and finance them in its own currency, and why the Federal Reserve effectively sets the global interest rate. So the system stability relies not on global gold convertibility, but on the depth of the US financial market, the credibility of institution, and the political and military power of the American state. So in short, the flexible dollar standard represents a monetary order anchored in the structural privilege of the dollar, serving as the world's means of payment, unit of account, and store of value. So, so my suggestion is that it is again this backdrop that the debate on the de-dollarization should be understood. Uh, so, but is there a problem with this standard? So there are many reasons why these standards are now put in debate. First of all, the United States twin deficits raise doubts about the long-term sustainability of the dollar, which, if you agree with this framework, doesn't make any sense. Second, as shown here in this slide, the Mar-a-Lago Accord, this Stephen Meyer article that became one of the keystone of the current American government political economy. The interpretation by Steve Myron attributes the US process of disindustrialization to a persistent overvaluation of the dollar, which he called would undermines external competitiveness. And he even proposed to charge an additional cost to foreign holders of the US treasuries to offset the burden of maintaining them as international reserves. So, third, the kind of what people are calling weaponization of the dollar through financial sanctions, the high cost of remittance and trade payments, the limited capacity of the Bretton Woods institution to assist heavily indebted economies, especially low-income economies, has further deepened global asymmetries, and I consider those are real, concrete problems for especially for developing economies facing rising debt service burdens and a limited policy space. So there are a flourish of alternatives of the dollar as mean of payment currently. These include bilateral agreements allowing trade settlements in local currencies, bypassing the dollar, the use of dollar. as our intermediate, as a mean of payment. All the digital financial innovation, such as new payment platform, um, the internationalization of the Chinese currency, advanced through swap agreements, the CIPS cross-border payment system, and also the offshore renminbi markets. Uh, these Besides these are the multilateral projects, um, uh, under, for example, the BIS Innovation Hub. It is developing flagship cross-border payment projects such as the Nexo and the mBridge. And uh, within the BRICS, discussions have focused on fast payment system integration, but not creation of a new common currency. So the emphasis on the BRICS discussion is on the interoperability of the currencies, the, the BRICS currencies, and the monetary domestic monetary of each member, the aiming at cost reduction, and the settlement in the national currencies to lessen dollar dependence. So, but despite these developments, the evidence presented on this slide shows that the dollar enduring strength shows the dollar's enduring strength. So in 2024, the dollar accounted for 58% of the global international reserve. So this is exactly the same number as 30 years ago. And so in 1995, the dollar also accounted for 58% of the global international reserves. So the stability has persisted despite repeated cycles of appreciation and depreciation against other major currencies under these decades. Also, another important indicator is the turnover rate of reserves. That is how often central banks used or renew them through operations. That rose from 86% in 2007 to 89% in 2025. So reflecting sustained global activity in dollar-denominated assets. And finally, China holds more than 3 trillion US dollars in reserves. So a sharp dollar devaluation would erode the value of those assets, a devaluation of the dollar against the renminbi. And as a result, the major international creditors, such as China and to a less extent Brazil and other economies around the globe, in this sense, have little interest on a dollar debacle because they hold assets in US dollar. So, and I was struggled by all this talk about the dollar debacle, and I went to see what is happening this year with the Chinese forex reserves. in US dollar. And to my surprise, although all the confusion, all the fragmentation, and all the uncertainty that the current U.S. American the government, the U.S. government is posing in the international system and the global economy, actually the international reserves of China went up this year, 2025, in relation to the 2024. So it's impressive how much the volume of these international reserves that China holds in US dollar. So to summarize my intervention, I would say that the flexible dollar standard, as I presented in the first slide, it's not being replaced. Maybe it's being modified somehow. What we are witnessing is not the end of the dollar system, but its evolution into a more plural international monetary architecture, uh, especially because of the alternatives use, bypassing the dollar, but the dollar in its whole as a means of payment. There is no size, so no size of a replacement of the dollar as a store of value. So in this configuration, other currency, particularly the renminbi, gain greater visibility and functional space, yet without dethroning the dollar as the central pillar of the global finance. So I will stop here. Thank you. Thank you, Rafael.
Thank you so much, Professor Julia Braga. Your talk about monetary and financial mechanisms was very insightful and show us that there is still a long way to go. And your framework from Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, from Franklin Serrano and other researches, maybe one of the principal frameworks from the global south to understand our international system. And now, for continue this debate, I would like to invite Professor Bruno De Conte, maybe in a similar framework, in a Brazilian framework, uh, for to understand this topic as well. So, Professor Bruno De Conte is a professor of international economics at the State University of Campinas, Unicamp, researcher at the Center for Economic Studies and Policy, SECOM, and the Brazil-China Studies Center, both at the same university, Unicamp. He is, as well, senior non-resident fellow at the Center for Africa and China Studies at University of Johannesburg, South Africa. He holds a PhD in economics from Université Sorbonne, Paris North, and Unicamp. So, Professor Bruno, please feel free to start your presentation.
Thank you very much, Rafael. Thanks for the invitation. It's a great pleasure for me to be here with you today to share this roundtable with all my colleagues. And it's also nice to take part in a conference that is being co-organized by Ibrachina. When I was director of the Confucius Institute, we organized plenty of events together. As you know, as you can see in my slides, I'm going to concentrate my presentation in the BRICS initiatives for the transformation of the international monetary and financial system through this outline. So I'll do some introductory remarks that can be shortened by the presentation made by Julia, which advanced some of the points I would raise here. And then I'll move to the BRICS initiatives, talk a little bit about Brazil's chairmanship of the BRICS this year, and then final remarks. Given the time, I won't have time to go into details, but then many of what I'm presenting here is in this note, which was published by Friedrich Eber Foundation and Transforma project at Unicamp. You can find it in their website if you want. And it will be published in a Russian journal very soon as well. Then just to start, I guess it's important to recall that, well, the BRICS was born as an official institution strongly in a position that was precisely strongly related to the will of changing the international monetary and financial system. So even before the first summit of the head of states, which happened in 2009 in Ekaterinburg, the finance minister of the BRICS had a meeting in São Paulo. This is one of the first official documents that we can find. It happened in November 7, 2008. As you can see, it's important to highlight it because it was some months ago, after the collapse of the Lehman Brothers. So it was the outbreak of the global financial crisis, and then the finance ministers were reunited, and the meeting was devoted to talk about the crisis, the financial crisis, which was born in the US, as you know, and then the possibility or the pertinence of changing this system. And then next year in Ekaterinburg, the first joint statement highlights it, has it in the heart. So the BRICS was born as an official group, having in its heart this idea of changing the international monetary and financial system. Just for the sake of comparison, the first trade ministers meeting happened only in 2011, already with South Africa, as you can see in the slide. So some years after the discussions related to transforming the global governance and changing the international monetary and financial system. Then I come to the current system. Julia already mentioned it, so I'll take advantage of what she said, just highlighting that, well, this system after 71 was unilaterally decided, shaped by the US. As you know, in the Bretton Woods system, it was already very much influenced by the US, but it was an agreement. 44 countries signed the agreement. But then in 71, unilaterally, Nixon and his government just dismantled the Bretton Woods system with this lack of convertibility of the US dollar into gold. So the US shaped this system for its own behalf, for its own interests. And then it created some uncertainties, but very soon the US was capable of restating the dollar as the key currency of the world, as Julia said, using also army, military power. I'll come back to this triad, which is common in the history of the international monetary system: army, energy, and currency. Then Julia mentioned some data. Here I got the one from the BIS, the triennial survey. And you can see, as she said, that, well, the US dollar has 89% of the share of these. It shows the currencies that are used for all foreign exchange operations in the whole world. So in 90%, let's say, of all operations, foreign exchange operations in the world, in one of the sides of the operation, we have the US dollar. Only in 11% of the operations, we have two currencies which are not the dollar. And then for the BRICS, the first one is the renminbi. It increased a lot in the recent period, which is astonishing because the international monetary system is very slow. The movements are very slow, but still it's 9% of the operations. And China alone has something today like, I don't know, 18, 19, 20% of the world GDP. So you can see that, well, the BRICS together, the BRICS currencies have less than 15% of this data, of the share of the global forex market. And the US alone 89%. So it's totally disconnected with the weight of their economies currently. But as Julia said, it's not only about the weight of economies, it is also about it, but it's about the deepness of the financial market, it's about military power, geopolitical power, and so on and so forth. And then it creates an international monetary system is completely asymmetric, with the exorbitant privilege for the US and many problems arising to the periphery of the world, related to macroeconomics, so volatility of exchange rate and so on and so forth, but also related to power. We cannot forget that money is power. So the consequences of the asymmetries come through the dynamism of macroeconomic prices, but also because money is power. So weaponization of the international monetary system, the problems related to the Bretton Woods institutions, and so on and so forth. That's why many countries currently are trying to join efforts in this effort of de-dollarizing the world economy. So we see some national policies. The most important one is the one implemented by China very strongly after precisely the subprime crisis after 2009. But then important policies also coming from the collaboration of Global South countries. And then I come to the BRICS initiatives, starting with a declaration by Lula. So it's interesting to see that, well, obviously with Bolsonaro, Brazil at least was somehow out of those discussions, but with Lula, the BRICS gained an ally in this effort because Lula is being very vocal in denouncing the problems related to the dollar system and the pertinence of a de-dollarization. Then within the BRICS, we have bilateral initiatives. The most important ones are between China and Russia. Obviously, because of the sanctions, Russia was absorbed by CIPS, the Chinese international payment system, which already showed the relevance of CIPS, even obviously if it is still marginal if compared to the Western systems. But well, what you see is that nowadays more than 90% of the bilateral trade China-Russia is done in national currencies. Russian banks are issuing credit cards linked to Union Pay. Brazil-China made some important agreements. Tatiana Rosito, later Lula, in China back in 2023 for bilateral trade in national currencies. A new cross-border offshore, center for renminbi will be created in Brazil. But the trade Brazil-China is still very marginally settled in the national currencies. And then we come to the initiatives of the BRICS as a whole, not only bilateral initiatives or isolated initiatives, but of the group. One of the very important ones is the BRICS contingent reserve arrangements. It's an arrangement related to swaps. Whenever a country has a problem with liquidity in hard currency, it can access the international reserves of the partner countries through swaps to curb these problems related to liquidity. So it's a nice arrangement in the design, but it was never used. It has more than 10 years now of history, and it was never used. And well, most of these 10 years, it was not necessary, but we had an episode in which South Africa needed liquidity in dollars during the pandemic. And what did South Africa do? Instead of going to the CRA, they got loans from the IMF. So it shows that, well, maybe there is a problem with the CRA. And one of the problems is precisely that only 30% of the total resources that countries can get through the CRA are delinked from the IMF. And then 70 after or beyond 30%, there is a clause that says that well, it has to have on track arrangement between the country and the IMF. So it shows that, well, it's still not something that may delink these countries from the IMF. And then South Africa needed more than 30% of its possibilities from, it needed 3.5, I guess, percent or 4, I don't know, billion. And then it went directly to the IMF instead of using the CRA. So it shows that needs reforms. The New Development Bank is maybe the most important institution created by the BRICS so far. It's different from the Western-led institutions for several reasons. It has a symmetric governance. So the 5 original member countries, they have same shares, same voting power, alternating presidents, very different from the IMF, the World Bank, respect to national sovereignty, and very importantly, it has a target of making at least 30% of the loans in the national currencies. It's still not there, but it's increasing. So it's interesting to see that even the BRICS Bank is somehow trapped by the dollar trap. But especially with Dilma Rousseff as the new president, she's trying hard to move ahead with this goal. And currently, almost 30% of the loans are in the national currency, especially for China and South Africa. It was possible to reach this target. One important thing is that with the enlargement of the BRICS, currently, the BRICS, enlarged BRICS, possess or control at least 40% of the energy sources, regardless of the energy source we are talking about, oil, gas, wind energy or green energy in general, and so on and so forth. So if the BRICS control more than 40% of all the sources of energy, it may have an impact in the international monetary and financial system. Why? Because as the US did in the past, there can be a joint effort to try to denominate and settle these energy sources in the national currencies of the BRICS, or the BRICS currency. The idea was somehow abandoned, but still a move can be made using this power related to energy. The BRICS currency, the idea was, at least officially or publicly, abandoned. The choice is being to use the national currencies, but the idea is still there. I won't discuss it because we don't have time for it. We can come back in the end. I just want to use my 3 final minutes to talk about the Brazil chairmanship this year of the BRICS. The final statement, I read it carefully, and it has good and bad things in relation to the effort to reform the international monetary and financial system. First of all, non-mention to a BRICS currency. In Kazan, it was the same. The idea came in Joburg Summit in 2023. But then it's not mentioned in the final statement, showing this choice, which I just told you about, of moving through national currencies. There were divergences within the group, and even within the Brazilian government, for instance. What I know is that some people are in favor of BRICS currencies, some are not. So the choice was moving through the national currencies. There are some nice statements, especially in relation to the expansion of the new development bank, allowing it to become indeed a global South bank. Colombia and Uzbekistan joined it, and it may be important for the de-dollarization effort to counterbalance the dollar hegemony and the Western-led hegemony. It has the BRICS interbank cooperation mechanism, which was created, and among other things, there may be exchange of practices related to operations not using the US dollar. The contingent reserve arrangements, much was mentioned in the beginning of the Brazilian chairmanship about the need to reform. As I said, it's very clear that it needs to be reformed. And then there are some nice things that were put in the final communiqué, claims for flexibility, inclusion of other members, and so on and so forth. But nothing concrete was put. So I, myself, at least personally, I was expecting that the reform would be implemented this year. But at least there are no public news on that. Maybe next year in the next summit. A multilateral guarantee scheme was created, and it can be important to foster more loans, especially from the NDB, in national currencies. And a BRICS grain exchange was created, and this is relevant. It may appear as something not connected to the international monetary system, but as I said, whenever there is coordination of the exporters of some important goods, then there can be coordination also in the currency of denomination and settlements. And this can be done, for instance, I mentioned energy, but it can be done also for grains. Then I come to my final remarks, my last minute. I totally agree with Julia. We are not seeing the end of the dollar system. The BRICS won't dethrone the dollar system in the near future, even if there are some movements. I also see some movements, and one of the very important movements is precisely this concerted effort to face dollarization, right? Not mentioning the power of China nowadays, geopolitical power, economic power, and the fact that the US is now very explicitly, more in the past, using it as a political tool. So it gives the opportunity to countries precisely to try to design new possibilities, even if they won't become reality in the near future. So we will face inertia. The international monetary system changes very slowly, as I said, because of conventions, because the background of the international monetary system does not change as quickly as one could imagine. One of the problems is also keeping a harmonic group within the BRICS, because obviously China is the most important country, but still, for joint efforts, it would be nice to keep a harmonic group. Dealing with internal divergences, then India, for instance, has a very ambiguous stance, because Modi wants to be a leader of the global South, but at the same time, he wants to be in good relation with the US. Maybe the tariffs may change it, because they can create more union or convergence within the BRICS group. We have to deal with the new paradigm of digitalization, and then we can discuss it later if you want, but it's very important that we think already in the new type of currency, the digital currencies. And then, as Julia said, the mBridge is a very important platform. Just a small but important correction to what Julia said. The mBridge was created by the BIS, but very importantly, the BIS withdrew the project last year, some weeks after the Kazan summit. And this is very important because in the background, it has been understood as a political move that, well, the BIS has seen the mBridge as a potential platform for efforts of de-dollarization, avoiding sanctions, and so on and so forth. So it was a political move that shows the potential of mBridge as a good platform. It involves 3 countries of the BRICS, but I would be in favor of Brazil, for instance, to join mBridge as a full partner. And obviously, we have to deal with the reactions from the US, which are only starting. And then regardless of who is in office, Trump or Biden, the Democrats or Republicans, the US will react. They are reacting, and they will react to the efforts of de-dollarization. Trump, just to finish, has mentioned that losing the dollar hegemony would be as losing a world war, just to show to what extent the US is ready to react to these efforts. And I finish here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Bruno De Conte. The statistics present were very interesting for our reflection. Your speech complemented what Professor Julia said, showed us that this is a discussion not only in the macroeconomic context, but also on the political and geopolitical side. So, and I think that this relates very much to the other discussions we are having at the event. And after this roundtable, we have a roundtable about the New Development Bank. So for viewers, continue with us. Now we have the speech from Dr. Chu Jing Mao. Dr. Chu Jing Mao is a head of research at the Bank of China London branch, general manager of Bank of China London Research Center, with a focus on Europe, the Middle East, and Africa and China markets, and steered the bank's research, strategy, and sustainable finance. He is a member of Center for Macroeconomics at the London School of Economics and Political Science, the LSE, and hold a PhD in finance from Adam Smith Business School at University of Glasgow. Please, Dr. Chujin Mao, please feel free to start your presentation.
Thank you, Rafael, for your kind introduction. Does anyone see the slides clearly moving? Okay,
Yes.
cool. Thank you for the excellent speech from Julia and Bruno. I think a lot of messages that I got are highly in line with my speech. So basically, I got this idea of how to title up my presentation based on the topic given by Rafael is kind of started with de-dollarization. Then is that possible to find more Ds, given there are so many English words started with D? And then I try to end up with 9 Ds, trying to make things a little bit interesting. It's definitely not interesting if you get 9 Ds for your grade or get your performance result. But nevertheless, we are talking about the dollar, and that's the D that we are going to be surrounded on the topic. So this presentation is based on my daily observation of the global market dynamics, and I'm trying to get some information to link what's the grand trend on the currency market in the world. So the first big trend that I'm looking for is in general the disinflation that we have been observing for the past 2 or 3 years. Inflation has been peaked in 3 years ago, but with or without Donald Trump's Liberation Day tariff wars. The inflation has coming down steadily in major world economies. There had been some kind of worrying signs from the food and potentially energy market in the recent months. But in general, we don't see a hyperinflation or the so-called stagnant recession to come to the world economy anytime soon. So that sets the base tone for the global economic situation. But if we look a little bit longer, if you see what has been happening at the sectoral level, what is driving the world economies, especially the major world economies. Unfortunately, we haven't seen much progress in in many major developed economies in terms of industrial production for the past few years. In these countries, not only European, UK, but also Japan also sees no real boost from the consumption side. So it seems that the so-called idea from Obama that she America, original from Nigel Ferguson, a British economic historian, has indeed been shown in this picture. Uh, uh, what China is going to produce, which has been seasoned through uh, the COVID shock and two Donald Trump wars from term one and the current term has not been stopped. So the production is still there. And also US consumers seem to have a lot of credit cards to use. And unlike their other counterparts in the advanced world, so they can still shop a lot. So demand and supply are kind of being centered in the two world economies. And they unfortunately seem to be very difficult to find a multi-parallel world for this economic scenario. So if we had dig deeper into the current side of the US financial markets, what's the major trend that driving the US financial market? If we look at into the details, we have heard about the Magnificent Seven, the seven leading technology giants. Uh, and with that, the big tech sectors has basically occupied most of the real development of the stock market movement. And in the same time, only 0.4% of GDP growth rate of the current of US GDP growth rate are from non-tech sectors. So roughly 80% are basically being occupied by AI, big tech, other big tech companies. And that's the reason people say that there might be the potential deflation of AI bubble. But then there's a question that is there really a AI bubble? And is that going to be burst if there is? So we go back a little bit history and to see that what had happened in the dot-com bubble period. And it seems that the technology sector stocks were joining with the same trend with the garbage level stocks last time. So, roughly 30 years ago. And this time, it seems there's a divergence of performance into the AI sector and the garbage level stock market performance. So, unless we see the two sides are converging together and showing the same movements, then potentially it might be too early to call a potential deflation. So we will see how it's going to affect the US financial markets and indeed, in the end, the dollar movements. So the dollar movement is also driven by another D, which is the deficit accumulated by years of trade deficit. But the trade deficit has been largely blamed by the current U.S. Administration from the towards to the Chinese side. But if you see what has happened for the past 40 years, the Eurozone and Japan has been quite steady in generating a trade deficit to the US. Yeah, China has been a relatively newcomer, especially after the Chinese entry of WTO, World Trade Organization, 24 years ago. So since then, China has been accumulating a trade surplus. But in the long term, if you see who are the largest debtors to the US, is still the Germany and the US, the Germany and Japan, who has been accumulating decades of the trade surplus. And China is catching up in terms of that side. So this kind of unbalance of the deficit is still being the main driving force of why there are trade wars. And then here comes to the trade war and the potential impact to the globalization. Based on different research, the globalization has been peaked before the pandemic happens. So pandemic definitely was a big shock. And then before and after that, there is Donald Trump's tariffs to the Chinese economy. And this time it's getting much stronger. Based on our observation, it seems that Donald Trump was not very happy with what the Donald Trump one tariff were to the Chinese side. And they were worrying about the potential rerouting of the Chinese exports through third countries to the US. Therefore, it's now towards to the all world economies. And that has been talked about, so-called tackle, Trump always chicken out. But unfortunately, it seems that Donald Trump has been very tough on many economies and is still in line what has been said in April. For Brazil itself, it seems that anything related to BRICS got hard hit, including Brazil, South Africa, and many other economies. But if we go back to history, we think about this kind of globalization trend. And if we are talking about the US, actually US for the past 200 years is not a free trade country. It's only after the so-called Bretton Woods system got real established that US got the dominant power. And the free trade could generate huge benefit to itself. Then they open up. So with a little blip or upward blip of the trade war, if we go back to the 200 history, it's nowhere near to the average level of the US tariffs towards to other economies. So we may treat this kind of deglobalization and relatively high tariff to the historical context, and then it might be not a short-term thing. So that's potentially a big worry to me if we are really think about the free trade is good for the world economy. And another thing is about defense, and there has been a lot of talks about the defense. And if we go back to the history and after the Nixon era, the steady slowdown of spending of defense has recently been stopped, and there is still a big catch up in terms of spending in terms of personnel, and it seems that there will be a lot of talks on that side, and that movement to the specific sector will affect how the money moves. And here comes to the debt. And the US has not been traditionally a debt accumulating country. It seems that the first pseudo treasury chair, Thomas Jefferson, he didn't treat his most success as the main handwriter of declarance of independence. is actually not accumulating debt after several years against the British. So there has been no accumulation of debt whatsoever. But after Nixon, after the refloating of US dollar, things seem to change. But even Bill Clinton was trying his best to move the scenario. Bill Clinton seems very difficult to button a lot of gates, but he buttoned his Treasury gates very tightly, and there was even surplus there. But what he get was not the Democratic Party winning the election, but George W. Bush from the Republican winning the election. Therefore, given the tightening policy was not popular and nobody is going to try, Republican or Democratic, that's the current situation to the right, to the side. But it's still too early to say what's the real implications of Donald Trump's policy. The big beautiful bill is going to be the negative side, but the tariff war is actually going to generate a positive side to the Treasury picture. And if we move towards in a few years, it might not be too bad. The similarly bizarre policy may unfold to the Treasury books. So here comes to the dollar, and there has been a lot of talks about the movement. But if we see what has happened after the financial crisis, roughly 17 years, the dollar has been moving strongly with a steady momentum, which can be shown from the left. There has been recent dynamics, recent fluctuations, and after the so-called Liberation Day. And indeed, after Donald Trump swore into the office, but it's still too early to say that the US dollar is going to dramatically depreciate. As far as the long-term momentum is still there. If we see how the de-dollarization, here is the keyword that we have to talk about, and but there is another keyword that I potentially want to propose: de-dollarization. If we see the left, the steady growth of use of renminbi is evident, and based on different resources, for example, BRICS already show that the usage of renminbi is towards to British pounds at that level. But from the middle, it seems that the US dollar is keeping steady in terms of status, but the light blue line, the euro, has been hard hit since the Ukraine war. There has been a lot of talk about how euro is going to keep the status currently. As Julia and Bruno has said about the reserves, it seems that the Chinese reserve has keeping very strong and steady. It's roughly equal to all G7 countries combined together. That gives a lot of room for Chinese monetary authority to maneuver, to manage, and steadily implanting the usage, more usage of renminbi in the global side. And we move into the even longer picture about how the currency may evolve. We probably can go back to more than 2,000 years. And I think that if we see the history, it seems that the strong currency is always with the strong power. And Bruno has mentioned about the tripart, and I do agree with that. And here comes to this timeline. And there begs the question, is there any potential alternative in the coming decades for the US dollar? And that's a big question to ask. But we see the trend, and we see the dominant currency come and goes, and we should keep our research ongoing, and we should keep our mind open. And if you are interested in what has happened in China, and I would like to talk a little bit more, but given the time restraint, I probably will only mention a few words. And the biggest news in the Chinese economic situation front is the New Year plan is being unveiled. There has no detailed plan, or I don't have the liberty to show it yet. But the information is keep coming until early next year. But in general, there has been a good boost in terms of how China is keep developing the the machinery, the industrial production, and how China is going to keep the high level opening up, which paves the way for more collaboration with other BRICS countries, including Brazil. And we hope that as a researcher on one hand and as a banker on another side, I personally can get more comments and feedback and potentially more collaboration with excellent speakers, fantastic students, and industrial experts. Thank you so much, and it has been lovely to be here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chu Mao. Your graphs are so informative and make us reflect deeply on what is happening, especially in more general terms, with other aspects related to the subject, such as the AI bubble and Trump's tariffs. So I think as well the fiscal issue in the US is also very interesting because it speaks to what Brazilian research have been saying since the last century about the privilege of the infinite debt, since like people like Teotônio dos Santos, Franklin Serrano, and other researchers from Brazil, and which may be changing today with a more multipolar world. So thank you so much. Now we have the professor Mok Faisal Karim. He is a visiting senior fellow at the National University of Singapore and associate professor in international relations at Universitas Islam International Indonesia. His research interest lies in the intersection of political economy and international relations, with an emphasis on the role of state institutions, state society relations, in explaining transactional issues faced by Southeast Asian countries. Please, Professor, feel free to start your presentation.
All right. Thank you so much, Rafael. Thank you again for inviting me. Such a great pleasure for me to share my thought or perhaps perspective, especially from Southeast Asian region. So today I'm going to talk about, how the conversation about de-dollarization, at least from the Southeast Asian perspective, is just not a longer an abstract or peripheral or economic in nature, but it increasingly now becoming a central, especially when it comes to us as a nation, us as ASEAN, as a grouping, and more importantly, us as a part of the global South. So basically, we always view de-dollarization is not only about economic matters, but rather a kind of a geopolitical and geofinancial reality, right? So in Indonesia and many other middle powers, we always long relied on the US dollars for everything from trade, reserve, or even external debt, right? But again, for over the past decade, with the rise of China, especially with the 2008 financial crisis, a series of external shock that actually exposed Southeast Asian vulnerabilities due to our independency and the fact that we sell a lot of kind of a commodities that heavily rely on foreign currency, and more importantly, because of the COVID-19 pandemic hit our economy, and with the the issue in Ukraine right now, we see the weaponization of dollar-based system and a growing fragmentation of this global financial order. We can see how SWIFT, we thought that SWIFT is very much technical, but somehow it can be weaponized easily, and that becomes a kind of a not only an economic issue, but also a kind of a uh, geopolitical issue for us. So my core argument is this. For us, de-dollarization, especially for middle powers like Indonesia, is a form of strategic hedging. So it's not merely an economic policy choices, but rather a kind of intended strategic policy, part not only part of broader our understanding of fragmenting global financial order. So So it's about gaining more flexibility. It's about us reducing external pressure and basically building a more resilient position within the global economy. So basically, we try to hedge. The de-dollarization is not about us try to be anti-West, but it's rather try to provide us with more flexibility. So we are not reacting passively with this great power conflict. We see that how at the end of the day we need to choose, right? Sometimes by pressure, but for the past 10 years, we thought that we can always try to, you know, to be friend with each other. So, but now increasingly, we need to have choices that we need to choose, and our choice will be try as long as possible to do the strategic hedging. So, de-dollarization is one of those choices. So, we are actively crafting this new narrative, you know, exploring such an institutional option and so on and so forth. So, uh, again, yeah, the world is not we I also believe with what other speaker has already said. Yeah, we are not witnessing the collapse of dollar dominance. Definitely not. But what some scholars see or view as a post-dollar moment, you know, a shift logic, you know, uh, rather than the structure. Yeah, so it's more a shift in logic. Yeah, in this moment the goal is not necessarily to replace the dollar, but to mitigate the asymmetries it produces. So that is the reason why the alternative path that Southeast Asian are exploring is hedging strategy through bilateral currency swaps. Yeah, so there is an alternative logic. Basically, by hedging we can diversify and and have a regional monetary experiments. Yeah, in the case of Indonesia, yeah, we are hedging against its risk, you know, by expanding bilateral currency swap agreement. And secondly, we also explored the importance of regional financial architecture uh, 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 anchored in East and Southeast Asian already well integrated regional market. And last but not least, I think this is the new one, and there is a kind of a new development here, which is new multilateral forums like BRICS and the new development bank. So there is a three layer of how we can provide or try to explore an alternative. So in this evolving landscape, Indonesia's approach to de-dollarization again is not driven by ideology, but rather by strategic necessity. It reflects our effort to actually diversify risk, you know, assert to some extent monetary sovereignty should there any kind of a crisis, yeah, and more importantly, expand our policy space in a very increasingly, you know, fragmented and very much politicized international economic environment. So again, I want to reiterate my argument that de-dollarization should be understood not as a rejection, but a kind of a strategic hedging, right? So the question then, what drives de-dollarization in Southeast Asia, right? Well, at least from my reading of the situation in Southeast Asia, there are several drivers. First and foremost will be the economic vulnerability to dollar-centric monetary policy, right? Because what I consider the most immediate driver, which is economic vulnerability. For many countries in Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, over dependence on US dollar means that our domestic monetary and financial stability somehow disproportionately, you know, affected by the policy made by US Federal Reserve Bank, even though they have no say in that policy. So in a sense, right, when the Fed aggressively hike interest rate, for instance, to combat inflation in the US, you know, the capital flow out of emerging market, you know, and that really hit, you know, many emerging economies, especially in Indonesia and Malaysia, so that they return to safer, higher yielding US asset. That also create a kind of a global flight out of the region, and that has a consequence which is very real. The Indonesian currency, rupiah, for instance, depreciated significantly if there is such policy created by US dollar. The same go, the same also for the cost of servicing external debt. Yeah, much of which is dollar dominated. It also increased. Yeah, the same go imported inflation rose because, you know, it will driving up our food and energy prices. And I think Other speaker already talked about the current account that can be also come under pressure. But this is not new, right? This is not new. It's been around from 2008. We saw a similar story during 2008 financial crisis. There is a taper tantrum again, and later on COVID-19. So this cycle of vulnerability create a kind of structural over reliance of the on the dollar, especially in trade investment. So that's the reason why in 2009, there is a kind of, I mean, not 2009, 2015 onward, there is a process that Indonesia and other ASEAN countries try to do to mitigate such vulnerability that motivate government to support alternative reserve currency. And secondly, definitely, as I said earlier, geopolitical uncertainty and weaponization of finance that has been around, and it's getting more and more, clear how does this play. The third one would be regional aspiration for financial sovereignty. So this is a kind of a more normative and political, but this is particularly true for Southeast Asia, which has an ASEAN as a way to build their regional sovereign financial architecture that perhaps would reflect, the reality of ASEAN growing economic weight, because ASEAN now is a very vibrant market economy based on commodities and services, and with a lot of consumer consumption-based economy. So ASEAN countries, including Indonesia, are collectively exploring alternative. One of which will be through ASEAN Local Currency Settlement Framework (LCS). So this is a kind of a regional-wide settlement framework where we can settle trade in local currency, such as rupiah in Indonesia, ringgit in Malaysia, baht in Thailand. And this is a concrete step towards such setting the trade in local currency. Indonesia has a bilateral LSE with Malaysia, Thailand, Japan, definitely China, and now Singapore and South Korea. So as of 2023, for instance, Indonesian Central Bank, Malaysian Central Bank, and Thailand Central Bank push further for cross-border QR code integration. So we can buy many things, and we by bypassing, the so-called foreign currency exchange rate through QR code integration. So it promote retail level transaction. And we also have Chiang Mai Initiative Multilateral, right? Chiang Mai Initiative Multilateralization is actually a kind of a regional wide kind of a regional safety net for us. It's a kind of a mini IMF, but with a local governance. We also have an ASEAN Bond Market Initiative. It was, also held by Japan, right? To reduce the region of reliance on US and European bond markets. So APMI encourage investment in local currency bonds. So these are all effort from ASEAN to internalize liquidity, build, resilience in the regional financial system. So Indonesia stance is showing a pragmatic approach. Indonesia is a clear and cautious, instead of not aligning itself with against the US or the dollar per se. So instead it is pursuing strategic hedging, as I said earlier. Yes, you can see Indonesia now entry into BRICS in this January 2025, but was accompanied by a public statement distancing itself from any campaign to replace the dollar. So that's the thing we need to highlight from the way how Indonesia tried to legitimize its position. And then the Central Bank of Indonesia, the Ministry of Finance always prioritize monetary stability, inflation control. So they try to, legitimize it through, a very much technocratic approach rather than geopolitical confrontation, even though we know this is a part of the strategic hedging. So we've discussed about what drive the de-dollarization in Southeast Asia, and then how are them being kind of operationalized in this sense. So there are several ways for Southeast Asian to do the de-dollarization. As I said earlier, with the LCS, and one of them will be bilateral currency swap agreement. I think other speakers have already touched upon this BCSA. So again, Bilateral currency swap is a kind of an arrangement between two central banks for exchange currencies. These are used during crisis, usually, provide liquidity in local currency to stabilize market, facilitate, more importantly, this is the most important one, facilitating trade and investment by avoiding the US dollar as an intermediary. I'm going to take a look on example of Indonesia. Indonesia has a very much huge, uh, BCSA partners. With China, for instance, is over 38 billion, one of the largest swap lines in Indonesia, and I think they keep negotiating it, along ASEAN-China trade agreement with Japan as well. So you see, the dollarization is not about renminbi internationalization only. We try to hedge also with Japan, 22 billion under ASEAN plus 3 Chiang Mai initiative. With South Korea, 10 billion. With Singapore, also 10 billion. So are these swap line actively used? Well, these line are primarily for precautionary, so designed to activate it during liquidity stress on or financial crisis. But Japan swap line includes a broader crisis management function, so it embed in our regional institution through financial cooperation within ASEAN. The second aspect, as I said earlier, local currency settlement mechanism, again, it refers to the use of direct local currency, in a cross-border trade and investment without converting into third currency. So it will reduce transaction costs, definitely. It will reduce exchange rates and dependence on US clearing system. And Indonesian partners of LCS mostly are coming from East Asian countries, Malaysia, Thailand, Japan, China. For instance, Chinese importer buys a lot of Indonesian palm oil commodities. Under LCS, the Chinese buyer can pay in renminbi, and the Indonesian exporter receive the payment. So by doing this, our palm oil, which primarily sold to China and India, can can be free from dependence on US dollars. Also, Bank Indonesia, the central bank, play a central role in promoting this. Uh, what do this instrument means for Indonesia, right? Well, the strategic rationale for all of this uh, instrument is that first, again, my argument, hedging against external shock, reducing exposure to US volatility, and secondly, asserting monetary sovereignty. Indonesia seek to build a more autonomous monetary space. It's not heavily rely on US monetary decision. Third, building regional trust and South-South cooperation, right? And the strategic implication will be that de-dollarization is not an anti-Western crusade, but rather, again, resilience. Uh, I'm not going into detail about this. This is a kind of a ASEAN financial infrastructure. Yes, we have the bilateral one, but we also try to create a financial cooperation anchor in ASEAN to create a more robust regional financial architecture underpinning de-dollarization. So ASEAN, together with the Northeast Asian partners, China, Japan, and South Korea, has been very much involved in building a robust institutional infrastructure. CMIM, as I said earlier, Chiang Mai Initiative. This is if there is a shock, we have almost 240 billion in multilateral currency swap. ASA, ASEAN swap agreement also. And there's a IBMF, as I said, and regional payment connectivity, the QR code that I've just discussed. And now ASEAN Infrastructure Fund, it was also backed up by Japan. So it's importantly, it's increasing aim to use a local currency in lending models. So every time there is an infrastructure project, its lending model is using local currency. Again, the strategic goal will be reducing US dollar reliance, embed regional financial resilience, develop finance without dollar exposure, and more importantly, promote a kind of a South-South financial cooperation and South-South financial autonomy. So I think I leave it there. Perhaps, another aspect that perhaps I would like to discuss, perhaps only 2 minutes if I still have a time, Rafael, is that this kind of economic policies basically legitimated both at the domestic level and also international level. This is where the notion of strategic narrative play important role because again, Indonesia, Southeast Asia in general, we don't want to be seen as a someone who are anti-Western, but at the same time, we don't want to be seen as someone who are too close to China or perhaps appeasing the US. So in this current geopolitical moment, the return of Donald Trump, yeah, to the White House, yeah, the Trump 2.0, yeah, basically create uncertainty, and that lead Southeast Asia to increasingly try to hedge, and that hedging can be seen in how, let's say, Indonesia and now Malaysia wanted to be part of the BRICS, yeah, to find alternative currency to the dollars, because these are hostile nation that you know that considered threaten America because I think we've got 32% tariff, yeah, and now reduced to 19%, but still there is a risk of antagonizing the United States and leading to make them even more antagonizing to ASEAN. And that is the reason why Indonesia BRICS membership and perhaps Malaysia soon, yeah, is an opportunity rather than alignment. So Indonesia indeed officially joined BRICS, yeah, in January 2025, but BRICS offer Indonesia a particular platform to first and foremost reform the global financial system, including the IMF and the World Bank. We can have a same voice with Brazil and China, and secondly, participate in what we perceive as a more fairer payment system, let's say, and assert the interests of the global South, basically. So that is the most important aspect. The second narrative is that we try to focus on ASEAN narrative. Currency diversification and not dollar rejection. So we still heavily rely on the dollars, no doubt about that. But we also try to avoid polarizing language. We use regional initiative. We use monetary resilience narrative, financial inclusivity, and more importantly, deepening regional integration as part of the narrative of you know of de-dollarization by focusing on interoperable digital payment system, cross-border QR code, and so on and so forth. Yeah. The third one is actually, yeah, domestic legitimacy, right? Where basically domestically the de-dollarization agendas is framed in everyday economic terms. We look at to protect rupiah, help exporter reduce transaction costs. So we're not really trying to frame it as a geopolitical effort for us to basically align more with non-US partners. Okay, I think that's all from me. Thank you so much. Looking forward for more discussion. Thank you, Rafael.
Thank you so much, Professor Mock Faisal Karim. It's really cool to get a perspective from another BRICS country, especially one like Indonesia, which joined not long ago. Sometimes Chinese initiatives may be more famous, but it's very interesting to learn about the Indonesia's initiatives. It also helps us to think how ideologically diverse countries can combine their initiatives in the economic field. So super interesting. Now, for finish our speech, we have Professor Vera Gers Dimitrov, professor and master in economic and political law from Mackenzie University in Brazil. Please, professor, feel free to start your presentation.
Good morning or good evening. I don't know. I'm very glad to be here. Find some friends and know new friends, colleagues for other countries. And everybody's seen my presentation?
Yes,
Okay,
we can.
thank you. I'm not an economist. I'm from the political and legal field. So I would like to put a focus on more political view of the importance of a new development bank and the initiative for de-dollarization, because as Professor Karim said, you are and others here de-dollarization. So I will put the focus more in economic diplomacy and the political importance of some initiatives for development and for increase the process for de-dollarization. Okay. This is my, as I said, I'm not an economist, I'm a lawyer, and I work in the specific and political field. So here's my contacts for who needs. Well, I would like to focus how the architecture of a new development bank is very important to increase these initiatives for de-dollarization, and how the narrative of the de-dollarization, the initiatives of BRIC countries, how this narrative is important to increase and somehow help other countries, other organizations to start creating new options for them. And this is very important. You can see here, for example, the New Development Bank is focused on the sustainable projects, specific in climate change, resilience, technological integration, social inclusion, and thinking on a perspective for the peripheral countries, the narrative of a bank uh, who are working with projects, are founding projects that will help this structure, sustainable structure, social structure, infrastructure is very important. For example, is a very interesting case of COP30 that you have a project of new development bank with local bank of the local funds of para-states. It's the state, the region of Brazil, who is holding COP30 here in Brazil. And more, they have other regional banks from Latin America that are helping founding a project for sanitation in Pará. So what does this help? Because when you see the news, the delivery or some articles, some speech, you have specifically in Latin America, you heard a lot of speech that you are found in a way to create the dollarization. You are in the way for the dollarization. But if you see the data, if you see the reality, you are quite far from this reality for the dollarization. Quite far. So it's the narrative that is helping create this expectation. So this is very important. Some initiatives of New Development Bank, as I said, the projects that NDB founds, or the way the NDB work. You have architecture in the NDB that is respecting the country systems that is more equal. You have equal right for votes in the structure of the members. You have more harmony. And I think the most important that this country system architecture help to create and networks for working with local partners. If you see a lot of projects that are approved on NDB, a lot of them is in the specific in India and Brazil, China as well. They had a lot of local banks and local partners, regional partners. That is very important because they start to do politics in the economic in the infrastructure, but the politics, the public policies are holding by in regionals and by the regions of the countries. You have a regional level for appear these projects, and this is very important because you try to create a narrative and actually you do some important projects that are holding and they are managed by local uh, actors, local institutions. So this is very important because you're trying to create new ways for working, new ways of funding, uh, without a conflict, without submit some political conditions. You delivered the managing, you delivered the organization, respecting the systems, and moreover, you deliver this for the managing is local. So it's very important to create trust. First of all, it's very important for create trust in NDB. You create more equal conditions, so you are not struggling in some region or not struggling in some country. And this is, I think, is very important. It's regional, so you can, in fact, trying to build some changing in the beginning. You try to create a narrative, you try to create a new environment in the beginning. So the way of this is very important and reinforce that why you why you heard a lot of de-dollarization. System as the NDB works are helping our regional partners, are are helping regional players. And as I said, this narrative is creating trust in NDB. It's creating trust somehow in these new initiatives. Um, that's why I think other colleagues already said, but I think Bruno said, the NDB they had by 2026 as next year, they have to provide 30% of financing commitments in local national currencies. It is very important too for this process of the de-dollarization, but it's a little far from the, in fact, for de-dollarization. So, as I said, this system are helping building trust, first of all, are helping create an environment and regional environment. And more than ever, you create the NDB could in somehow have a very plan of a very map of the global south. I don't like global south, I prefer peripheral countries. They have a map of peripheral countries needs. And when you see the BRICS, the projects, you see very similar needs in these projects. For example, India and Brazil. Most of the projects in India and Brazil are linked in mobility and transport infrastructure, basic mobility and transport infrastructure, like building bridges, new roads, and this is very important too. And a lot of projects in energy. I think, I don't remember if Bruno said about energy. You have a lot of projects, China too, but India and Brazil, they have very linked projects in energy, different kinds of energy like solar energy, or in Brazil, specific some projects with Exalt with eolic energy, but are green. The shows that the potentiality of the BRICS countries energetic power. But it's very interesting because the needs of some countries of that are having projects in NDB, South Africa, Brazil, and India are basic, and is interesting because that's my point. The NDB are not requiring some standards or some high standards to receive some funding as well. You don't have, I don't know, European standards of sustainability that are very regulated, that are very high standards on their needs. The sustainability for NDB counts with the real understanding of the country of sustainability. Somehow are projects that if you're gonna see, they're gonna have some environment impact. But this environment impact is very important to create a better environment to reach new levels that is very important for basic infrastructure. For example, I need sanitation in Pará. Maybe gonna have some environment impact, but is the reality of the region, for example. You have the needs. You have a project already that approved on this year of in China. Is a project to more linked in with technological and improving on technological needs. I don't remember the city, but it's from our airport. You're gonna have some impact, environment impact, but that's the interesting. The NDB are always purchasing. Think on the way of a real need of the country. Think environment, think energy, think technological integration, think social inclusion on the country system. So that's the difference between the NDB. Of course, NDB don't have the scale of World Bank or the International Monetary Fund, for example. But this methodology of work is very important because they start to create trust. In fact, it starts to create new infrastructure, new relation between the regional partners, the regional players with the bank. So that's why NDB, I'm not talking about financial trust. I'm not talking about financial standards. I'm talking about effective the political and the narrative and how is this important too, because in fact is a way is creating a political will. Of course, geopolitical events, as Professor Karin said, the political use of financing, then the B are in another way. They are the contra-hegemonic somehow tendency. So that's why it's very important for the debate. Think about the political impact of the NDB. Here are some partners. That's interesting. NDB are fomented, are increasing the relation between other banks in regions. For example, Fonplata is a bank that will have like 5 Latin American countries as Bolivia, Argentina. They are starting to work with NDB in Brazil with in regional banks. You're creating more integration in the region. That's why it's very important to this narrative, because they are always purchasing another partners, are connecting and I don't know, start to create more a tight connection between players and, for example, in my region of Latin America and other players with NDB and with national players too. So that's why it's important to think in NDB and the role on the economic diplomacy and political role of NDB, because there's, as I said, for finishing my presentation, are creating a relation of trust and option for another view, for another way, for another possibility. I start to open the discussion. So if I start, we are discussing here the discussion of de-dollarization. I work in a consultancy. I am partner of a consultancy, and I work for a lot of Brazilian companies. And the debate of de-dollarization, the debate of impact of some initiatives, are in the they're watching this. So I think it's very important to start to talk about this role. Thank you a lot. I'm a kind of prolix, so it's a problem of lawyers. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Vera. Your presentation was too insightful. I believe that different perspectives from different eras are very important to us. Uh, GBRICS, the GBRICS Center is from a lawyer, a law university from San Francisco and University of São Paulo. So it's too good to your presentation for us, and just as we are doing at the other panels at our event. Now we finish our speech and we have a little time to questions. Now we have actually three questions. The first one, I will start with a general question. Don't have a specific person to answer this question. So feel free, anyone of you, to answer this question. And the question is, in what concerns Brazil, the recent Rubio statement. Rubio is the Secretary of State of United States. The Rubio statement that Brazil should have US as a more important partner can make Brazil slow down toward a de-dollarization. Remember that we are geographically in the same continent. So anyone can answer this question for us? Anyone?
Well, if you want, I can comment on that. And I really hope not. I mean, I cannot say, obviously. As I said, even within the Brazilian government, there are people who are more in favor of initiatives related to de-dollarization, other which are more cautious on that. So obviously there might be divergences, but I'm fully convinced that at least Julia knows much more than me because she's there, even if not, here she's talking with her head as a researcher, so probably she won't be able to comment on internal issues. But I'm fully convinced that Lula himself is committed with this idea. And it's very true that it's nonsense to make a discourse which explicitly tries to put Brazil in a struggle with the US. It's nonsense. No country will do it. But even if we have diplomatic discourses in order to avoid big problems, the path of the efforts to de-dollarization must be kept. So, and as I said, even if Trump's administration is much more vocal on these threats to the countries which do the efforts of de-dollarization, the U.S. government will always have this stance of trying to defend dollar hegemony, Republicans or Democrats, and this might not curb the efforts worldwide. Now, Trump, it would be another discussion, but if you want, we can enter into that. In my opinion, Trump is trying to somehow reshape, Trump administration is trying to reshape the international monetary and financial system through the stable coins, right? So he's trying to use the structural power of the US to reshape the system in order to keep a dollarized world through also the stable coins. So they will have several means in order to try to threaten and keep the world as it is. But this should really not make other countries reduce their effort of de-dollarization. I really hope it won't happen in Brazil.
Thank you so much, Professor Bruno De Conte. And now we have a question for Dr. Chujin Mao. And the question is, as a banker, how do these more politically controversial issues come to the entity like the Bank of China? Do you really take any initiatives within China as a global player or just a commercial bank itself?
Yeah, so Bank of China traditionally has played for several decades as a central bank before it's becoming the dominant international orientated bank from China. So based on the history, Bank of China has been doing a lot of international financial related activities including taking care Chinese currency reserves until several decades ago. So, if we are looking about the daily activities about the dynamics of the currency market, Bank of China is treating a kind of it's not a fast, furious process for renminbi to be widely used in the world financial markets. It's more based on the real need of the related activities. For example, if we are talking about Sino or Brazilian economic situation, if there are indeed some genuine trades that moved between the two great nations, then there is no need to use a third country currency if we are talking about the bilingual trade. So, US dollar. So that's the theoretical background of why the renminbi could be widely used. And for now, largely because US dollar is widely used, it's going to be a dominant power for the foreseeable future. Therefore, although the world trade the world trade related to the US is roughly 1/5. So other world trade system not related to the US are 4/5. But US dollar is occupying at least 3/3 of the as a trade medium. So this kind of imbalance in the long run will be adjusted, which is based on the real movements of goods and services in a bilingual way. So Bank of China will see it as a gradual status, and it will not be a kind of sudden change of the status in terms of renminbi internalization. But the long-term trajectory is quite clear. The gradual movement and wider usage of renminbi for the bilingual trade not related to another country, but directly related to China and another country like Brazil. So I hope that I can explain the situation okay. And if there's any further question, I'm happy to address it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chujin Mao. And for finish our roundtable, a question to Ms. Vera. And the question is, how do you see the prospects for BRICS Pay in Brazil, since it seems that it already works between China and Russia?
Uh, I'm not sure it's working in China and Russia.
I
As
think
I
very
know, as a
similar.
it's as far as concerned, you have BRICS Pay, their project. I think it's a prototype already, but they actually they have like they were working. But as I concern, the BRICS Pay is like for B2B trade. So I don't seem so some reliable sources to respond to that. But as I know, the BRICS Pay, the project of BRICS Pay, the project of the BRICS platform, it's a are created with the St. Petersburg University, and is a working with more for B2B trade. I don't know if I have incorrect information, but I think the perspective to work here in Brazil is not so close yet. I don't know if another colleagues have more information about the initiative. I know that you have some options for SWIFT, like with blockchain technology, BRICS Pay, but for BRICS Pay specific, the platform BRICS Pay, the last time I saw is for B2B trade, and you have more Russian companies using this platform as a test. I don't know about China, Maybe Dr. Chuchinmao can, I don't know, answer that. But as a concern in Brazil, I think is a little far for the use of this platform. I don't know if Rafael or Bruno maybe has another answer. But for now, I think in Brazil specific is a little far. In Russia, as I know, you are using this platform. Some companies already use it that. And I don't know the information of China.
Yeah. So for the platform that if RMB clearing and other track record are going to be capped. First of all, CIPS is a dominant platform, and there are less and less usage from SWIFT, and I think also SWIFT are not going to deal with Russia for now. And in terms of other collaborations, I feel that it's really the need and the demand. If there's indeed genuine need for the Russian oil to be exported to China, and then there will be some kind of transactions happened. But I feel that it seems there's no big boost for developing or use a kind of alternative platform for boost the usage of the currencies. So that's my current understanding. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the both answers. I think that it's not a BRICS trade, right? It's like a trade between China and Russia is no
Ah,
longer
okay.
being denominated in dollars, but depends of the other platforms like cross-border interbank system.
Okay.
And
I thought it's like specific for BRICS platform because you have some prototypes of that. I thought
yeah,
that it was about this specific
yes, of
question.
course.
Sorry.
No. It was the question. It was the question. So I don't know if anyone would to answer or contribute for more.
Rafael,
So
just to want to
okay,
complete what Bruno said about the first question, and based on my reasoning in my intervention, I think there is no sign that the Brazilian central bank wants to get rid of the US dollar as a store of value in the international reserve. Um, this is because the accumulation of international reserve was key for the Brazilian economy to gain policy space, and also in other emergency countries. The Brazil became a creditor, and much of our macroeconomic problem in the past were pretty much related to the fact that we were debtor in external currency. So maybe a diversification of the international reserve would be a strategy for either in the future for the Brazilian Central Bank to pursue, but not to simply sell the international, the treasuries, the U.S. treasuries, even and also because it would not make much sense to do that, because I mean there is a lot of miscomprehension on what this international are reserves are, since we have a flexible exchange rate, so it would delocate our exchange rate related to dollar maybe in an undesirable way, and we can this is a buffer for crisis, and so it does not relate to the use of initiatives to reduce the dollar as mean of payment. This initiative is to lower the cost of trade transaction, for instance. So there are, different aspects of, as I mentioned, of the dollar. So one is related to mean of payment, and these are the ones that Brazil are interested in use more intensively, but not as a way to get rid of our international reserves. So I think it's one thing that it's important to bear in mind about the role of the dollar.
Thank you so much, Professor Julia. So, would anyone else like to give an opinion about the topic?
Yeah. So if I may, can I say that a few words? I really like Julia's comments on means of trade media and the international reserves role in terms of US dollar. As a trade media, I do encourage more usage of direct related currencies. If China import Brazilian beans or China export EVs to Brazil. The two currencies are directly involved in China and Brazil, probably a better way to be adopted. But we are really thinking about how we are going to host the best value for the big amount of reserves. That's a quite a delicate task, and it would be very difficult to move if we really don't see any sign of US dollar going to depreciate anytime soon. So the deeds that I mentioned basically give the idea that what's potentially the trend may matter to the macroeconomic ones, which will play the role into the future US dollar dynamics. So for example, if the stock market is going to be shattered, or if there's indeed a big problem happened to the treasury market, to the US bond market, then how the US dollar value and its asset are going to be more hot topic in terms of international reserve discussions. So it's an ongoing discussion. I do find this topic that presented by many panelists and chaired by you is a very good one. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chujin Mao. So, for finish our roundtable, I would like to say thank you for Professor Julia, Professor Bruno, Ms. Veras, Dr. Chujin Mao, Professor Karim. It was a pleasure to stay with you here in our roundtable about the dollarization. For our viewers and for you as well, we have our roundtable that starts in the 10:15 a.m. now, just after this roundtable about the New Development Bank role. So again, thank you so much, and that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.